Hello, okay, for those of you returning to the channel, welcome back, and for those of you that are new here, that have just stumbled upon this video, then thank you for joining me. And if you find yourself wanting to stick around to follow just some random Welsh geek ramble on about film and TV, then please hit the subscribe button. It will mean an awful lot to me. And yeah, welcome to my spoiler-free review of They Will Kill You, an action comedy horror film directed by Kirill Sokolov. I think that's how you pronounce the name. Apologies if it's incorrect. From a script that he co-wrote with an Alex Litvak. And I've been really looking forward to this movie. From the glimpses that we've been getting of it from within the trailers, it's got me really excited. You know, it looks, from the trailers anyway, it looked to be this kind of very wild, entertaining experience within this sort of demonic backdrop, this demonic sort of setting, being this high-rise tower. And yeah, it looked fun. It just looked wildly entertaining from the glimpses that we were getting from within the trailers. And so the plot follows an ex-convict who answers an ad to be a housekeeper at a mysterious New York City high-rise, not realizing she is entering a community that has seen a number of disappearances over the years. And you've also got Andy and Barbara Muschietti producing you. Again, apologies, I've absolutely butchered the pronunciation of those names there. But they're you producing. And so, yeah, I was just incredibly excited for this. From what I was getting, the vibe that I was getting from the trailers, it just looked to be this kind of just wild, quick, breezy, entertaining thrill ride. And it got me really, really excited, you know, and that was what I was in the mood for last night. A 90-minute roller coaster thrill ride that entertained me. Did it achieve that? You know, did it achieve what they were selling within the trailers, within sort of the marketing? So, right off the bat here, I'm just going to admit it, I had a hell of a good time with this movie. I just had such a fun, entertaining ride with They Will Kill You. It is exactly what I wanted, what I was in the mood for last night. It's around 90 minutes and the runtime is perfect for the type of movie that I felt like they really wanted to make here. I'm seeing a lot of criticisms around it being, you know, style over substance. Yes, I get that. But the movie for me works because it's not trying to be anything other than what it is, I felt. You know, is it perfect? No, you know, I did still have issues with it, but those issues wasn't enough to really take me out of this experience. It was wildly entertaining, and it made me laugh. And like I said, it knows what it is. And it wasn't trying to be anything other than that. And as a result, for me, the film just sort of swallowed me up, and I was entertained for the full 90 minutes of the movie. It has this kind of almost like a old school 80s, 90s approach to how the story is brought to life, you know, how the narrative is constructed and how the movie is shot, you know, from a technical perspective. It kind of gave me 80s and 90s vibes that I absolutely adored. Especially the setup, I'd say especially the first 30 minutes, where we're introduced to Asia and Maria Reeves, these two sisters who are trying to escape their abusive father. And even though they're completely two different movies, it reminded me of the setup of Con Air. I know that's going to be for some a bit of a stretch, but for me, when I was watching it, that first 5 minutes, in how they just wrote and set up the main characters and its story, it just reminded me of Con Air. And like Con Air, like I said, you know, both completely two different movies, they sort of, in their DNA, had, you know, they were quite similar in how they were constructed and in how the story, I felt, played out. You know, just wildly entertaining, nothing incredibly deep, you know, there's nothing incredibly, you know, emotionally intense about the experience. And going into this movie, I wasn't really expecting that. I wasn't really wanting that, or I didn't have the desire for that. Would the movie have benefited from perhaps a little bit more substance and a little bit more depth? with the relationship between his characters, especially the two sisters, and, you know, exploring perhaps a little more into sort of the reasons to why they're escaping their past or escaping their abusive father and all of that. Yes, the film could have perhaps been a little more deeper and perhaps a little more emotionally intense, but I felt like it didn't take away from the overall, well, for me anyway, personally, it didn't take away from that overall sort of satisfaction that I had with the experience. It just didn't take me out of the experience. I still had fun. I was still entertained by what was being brought to life because I felt like they knew exactly what it was they were making here. And, you know, it was due to how all these elements, you know, from a technical perspective, the performances, and just how, you know, how the movie is edited, how the movie is shot, and that runtime. You know, it's a very tight, breezy experience. It is constructed very much like a roller coaster ride, I felt, and I just enjoyed it so much. And it's because of all those different pieces is why, you know, kind of gripes aside, yes, issues aside, I'm not saying it's perfect, but it still worked for me, and I was entertained by this experience. And it did just remind me of 80s and 90s movies that I grew up with, that were, you know, just stories that you could be sucked into and be entertained for, you know, 90 minutes or 2 hours and just have fun. Not every movie experience needs to be emotionally or thematically intense. There's sort of signs of it, you know, it is exploring, there are themes in which the movie's exploring around siblings and sort of deeper and darker themes, you know, they are there within the story, but they're not concerned about really fleshing that out. The movie is not all about that, and I feel like it's because of all those other different pieces in how it's constructed, how the narrative is constructed, and how it plays out. For me, it still ended up working, and I ended up being immersed within this story. It really does feel like, you know, just in how it was shot, how it was edited, and how it was constructed, it feels, or it's designed to be this sort of roller coaster ride, or this kind of haunted house theme park ride, you could say, where it just doesn't stop for the full 90 minutes. And I just found myself really, really enjoying it for that. It's a very violent movie. There's a lot of blood on the screen, a lot of gruesome deaths. And, you know, I think it pushes the 15 rating here over in the UK, but I get why it was a 15 as well, because when it comes to the violence, when it comes to the kills, it is very kind of Looney Tunes cartoon-like. Like, it's very gory, it's very bloody, and, you know, it is very violent, and I really enjoyed those elements of the movie because it's all brought to life through practical effects, or from what I can tell anyway, it was mostly practical effects, and I just loved that. But it does have, due to sort of the style in how the movie is shot and how these sort of scenes play out with the action and with sort of the deaths, you know, it does have that kind of Looney Tunes cartoon vibe to it, but it works due to sort of the tone in which they establish within this movie. You know, overall, like I said, going back to what I've said already, it just works as an overall experience due to what I felt like they were setting out to bring to life here. And I just really found myself enjoying and loving those moments, like with our main character Asia, as she goes up against these members of this satanic cult. And it's just how those moments play out, how the moments are shot and edited, just the way in which this energy is injected into those moments due to how these scenes are constructed and shot, and just how the camera is used. I fucking loved it. It was very creative. It felt different. Yes, it's kind of got like a Looney Tunes vibe to it. That's the only way I can describe it. But it works for the overall experience, and I just found myself really enjoying it. And again, it kind of just plays into that kind of the pace and that energy that is sort of created throughout the entire experience. It has that momentum, and I feel like that 90-minute runtime was perfect for the type of movie that I felt like they were making here. And it's as a result of just how that story plays out with its pace and that energy that is kind of instilled or sort of created, and just how it sort of spirals throughout the narrative. I just found it to be incredibly entertaining. I'm going to touch on one of the issues that I did have, and it was something that I found myself, it was in the third act, and I just found myself still enjoying this particular moment, but I'm thinking, why did you do that? Because like, I'm looking at it, you know, I've always wanted to be a filmmaker. This is why I'm doing this. You know, being a director, being a filmmaker is and will always be my dream job. So when I'm watching these movies, for the most part, I'm looking at them through like a filmmaking perspective. I'm still being enjoyed, you know, I can still be entertained and just be sucked into the story and everything, but sometimes I will see a decision that's been made within a certain moment or a scene, and I can't help sometimes but think, why the fuck did you do that? Because you were nailing it. You were sort of knocking it out of the park up until a certain moment. And then you make this decision to do something. And it's like, it's kind of just baffling to me. And I'm going to try and be vague about this particular moment because this is a spoiler-free review. But it's going back to practical effects. Now, there is a lot of practical used throughout this film. And I fucking love that. But there's a moment within the third act, I'll just sort of call it or refer to it as being the final confrontation. And it kind of starts off with an animatronic. You know, it has practical effects within it. And I'm liking it. I'm liking what they're doing. It's different. It's, you know, but it's also taking me back to sort of old school style of filmmaking, like movies, you know, dark fantasy and gothic movies from the 80s and the 90s. It has that vibe about it, especially within the third act. And I was really digging it. And then all of a sudden, they use CGI as a way, like I could tell why they're using the CGI because it needs to enhance a certain sort of element within this moment in the third act. But I just felt like they went over the top with the CGI. And I really felt like they really needed to pull back on it. And I'm like, why are you doing that? You know, you're doing such a good job at the moment at implementing practical effects. And they just go really sort of overboard with the CGI within this moment. And for me, I just found that baffling. Does it take away from my overall enjoyment? No, I was still having fun. I was still enjoying what they were doing with this movie, with this experience. You know, it was still working for me, but there was sort of I had minor issues throughout, and that for me was one of them. And it was just like, yeah, from a filmmaking perspective, you know, for me, from sort of my own personal perspective, you know, this, at the end of the day, this is just how I felt. I just felt like that was a decision that maybe they could have just sort of pulled back on that CGI, but I wasn't there. I wasn't seeing sort of what was being brought to life within the frame, and sort of the, you know, I wasn't involved with the decision making and why they just sort of went down that route. So, you know, perhaps there are valid reasons to why they went down that route. And just going back on, you know, in regards to the themes, those kind of the darker themes that they are exploring with these characters, and sort of that kind of the emotional element within its story. Yeah, it's not emotionally intense. It's not really that deep. But it's somewhat there. And as a result, it still kind of works for what sort of I felt like they were aiming for with this movie and the style of this movie. You know, again, it reminds me of movies from the 80s and the 90s where they are just straight up fun, wildly entertaining thrill rides. That there is a slight emotional current there, but it's not too interested by being bogged down by it. And for me, I could sense that awareness. Again, that's just me. But that's why it worked, still worked for me. Would it have benefited maybe a little bit from kind of minor tweaks with those sort of the themes in which they're exploring and how they explored them, and perhaps that kind of going a little deeper maybe within the relationship between the sisters and the past with their father and all of that? Yes, but it still worked. Zazie Beetz, who plays our main character, Asia, I thought she was great. I really liked her. I really liked what she was doing with the character. Like I said, you know, it's nothing incredibly deep here. But you get the mission that she's on. You get the character through how she's brought to life through the performance of Zazie Beetz. And I just found her incredibly likeable. And again, all the performances kind of really play into sort of the tone and style of what I felt they were aiming to achieve here with this movie. It has a great score. I really dug the score by a Carlos Rafael Vieira. I think I've butchered that pronunciation there, but I do apologise. But a great score there by Carlos, and it does some really cool sort of things with the sort of demonic elements, or capturing those sort of demonic elements within its story, within the score, that I found myself really enjoying, really liking. So yeah, the movie's been out now, I think it's 2 weeks. I could be wrong. I am a little late getting around to catching it. I do recommend it. It's a hell of a good time. Depending on your mood, I suppose, and what you're looking for. You know, this is a wildly entertaining, demonic thrill ride. I know, and I kind of loved how the setting played into the story as well. There's kind of the high rise. It has this sort of, almost like a Dante's Inferno sort of aspect to its story that, again, they kind of touch on that, but don't really go anywhere with it, but again, doesn't take away from the overall experience. But I was sort of getting a Dante's Inferno vibe from how kind of the story plays out, and sort of how the character, and sort of the character's journey through this story, and sort of how she sort of makes her way up through this high rise to get to her sister. I kind of really like that element, and sort of how it was brought to life, and sort of the, you know, just the overall aesthetic of the movie. You know, it does capture this kind of very retro style or old school style of filmmaking that I do miss, and in many ways I felt like this was kind of a love letter to those kind of movies from the 80s and the 90s. It kind of has it there within the DNA. I mean, there's this one moment in the third act, and it gets real, you know, real demonic. Like, you know, we really sort of really go into kind of like a fantasy, dark fantasy, gothic territory, and just the way in which it plays out, I was grinning. I'm like, oh, I really like what they are doing here with shadows, the lights, you know, the cinematography. I was really enjoying it for, you know, for what it was, for what it is. And so I get the mixed response to the film, but I think, depending on what you're looking for, I enjoyed it. I just had a hell of a good time with it. This is a movie that I could easily go back to and just watch over and over again. You know, if I was back in my, you know, early teens or as a kid growing up, this is one of those movies, along with films like Con Air, for example. Even though I know they're completely different genres, different types of movies, they just have that. I felt like they kind of had that same aesthetic to how they were brought to life. They have that kind of same structure, you could say, in sort of how they brought to life, both technically and narratively, and just 80s and 90s movies in general. And so I just found myself having a real good time. So I do really recommend you check out They Will Kill You. It is exactly what I felt like they were set it out to make. You know, from a kind of a personal perspective, when it comes to sort of my own personal preferences, yes, there are things that kind of knock the score down a little bit for me and how I felt towards the movie. But overall, it was a solid, enjoyable, entertaining thrill ride. And there are aspects or many elements of it that I found myself really admiring. So yeah, they are my thoughts on They Will Kill You, and I will be giving They Will Kill You on They Will Kill You. But what do you guys think? Have you seen it yet? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you agree or disagree with anything I've said? And please let me know in the comments below, and let's get a discussion going. And if you've made it this far into the video, then thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. I do feel like that it probably takes, you know, a lot for anyone to endure the entire duration of these reviews with me rambling on, because, you know, that's what I do. I ramble on. But it's just how I like to express my love for film and filmmaking. But it does mean the world to me. Your support means the absolute world to me. Whatever that be, liking, subscribing, commenting, I really do appreciate it. And just apologies as well for the lack of movie reviews over the last 2 weeks. Like I said a couple of moments ago, it's been a hectic couple of weeks. when it comes to reality. There's been a few changes, and then coming down with a lurgy sort of just resulted in me not going to, or not being able to sort of go to the cinema when I wanted to. But I really, really wanted to check out They Will Kill You, and I managed to squeeze it in last night, and I'm glad I did, because I really, really enjoyed it, and I do recommend it. So yeah, look, I've rambled on again. I've rambled on enough now, but just another massive thank you to everyone that is supporting the channel, to all the new subscribers. Welcome, thank you for joining me on this journey. And yeah, that's it from me for now, guys. Thank you all for watching. I really do appreciate it. I'll be catching you guys soon.